very pleased to be joined by Anna Malangdogwi. Anna is a scholar, a PhD candidate, and a prolific writer addressing questions of Filipino domestic politics, regional geopolitics and economics, and of course, culture and history. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you so much, Professor Warwick, for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here talking with you. A little nervous, but I'll try my best to provide substantial answers to the question, especially with regard to the history of my country. I'm not an historian, but I think I have my own understanding of history thus far. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And speaking of history, I think it's probably worth for our viewers to get a deeper sense of the Philippines from an historical perspective. In a recent piece you wrote, you talked about the fact that there has been a Philippines before European colonialism. And I guess I just wanted to cast our minds back several centuries and perhaps begin telling the story of the emergence of the Philippines, its settlement, its culture, its peoples, and then, of course, work our way through the various stages of colonization at the hands initially of the Spanish, then the Americans, and then the subsequent post colonial period. So perhaps we can, in a sense, go back to the beginning, Anna.
Yes. If Professor Warwick, the history of the Philippines is rich in indigenous development, but it's also a product of colonial subjugation and post-colonial struggles. If you look back in the ancient history, it was actually inhabited by the so-called Austronesian-speaking people who settled in the archipelago, because the Philippines is an archipelago at least 30,000 years ago. These are the early Filipinos, and during that time, there were already what you call a communal unit of organizing or a society. And basically, until now, it's still the what we call the barangay, which is the basic unit, political unit of the Philippines. But this was already existing during the ancient time. And this is usually being led by what you call a datu in our own language, but in English, it's actually chieftain. And also, long before Ferdinand Magellan came to the Philippines, and that was 1521, because, famous Magellan, it's in our history, came to the Philippines and discovered the Philippine archipelago. And at that time, there was no such thing as Philippine, or the Philippines was not really named as Philippines. It was, the Philippines was part of a vibrant maritime world shaped by what you call the Austronesian peoples. The Philippines basically was an archipelago that was part of the so-called vibrant maritime Silk Road, and it's not an isolated landmass, because at the early times, the Philippines already, or the early Filipinos, had many interactions with different peoples in Southeast Asia, even with different kingdoms in Asia. And this includes the Chinese Empire, Brunei, the Vietnam, which was called Champa during that time, Majapahit, which is now Indonesia, and Srivijaya, which is now Malaysia, and even the Khmer Empire, and among others. So basically, the early Filipinos has this kind of vibrant and very good relation between different Southeast Asian peoples and even the Chinese in the ancient times. That was before the colonization period. And if you look at the Philippine history, the first colonizer of my country was the Spaniards. And when you talk about, specifically when you talk about trade with China, it was already there. The connection between the Filipinos and the Chinese was very much prevalent and existing already during the ancient times and the pre-colonial time. And also in the pre-colonial time, there were already during the 14th century, Islam has taken roots in Sulu and in Mindanao because of the interaction of the people in that part of the archipelago with Arabs, Malay, and Indian traders. So the Sultanate of Sulu was one of the main features of the ancient Philippines. And this is a very important part of our history, because in the Sultanate of Sulu already has a very sophisticated political system and have very good connection with the Chinese empires during that time. And one of the famous story that actually in most cases Filipinos now they forget about this, but this is a very important footnote in our history, or a part of our history, is the life of Sultan Paduka Pahala, who traveled to China during the Ming Dynasty, and it was his life and his leadership during that time was actually an example of how strong and robust the connection between our Filipino ancestors and the Chinese and even other peoples in Southeast Asia before the Western colonization of Asia, of the Philippines and Southeast Asia, to be more specific. So Sultan Paduka Pahala, or Paduka Batara, was the ruler of Sultanate of Sulu in the early 15th century. And he went to China, and he was accepted by the Chinese Emperor Yongli in a grand way. However, when he came back to the Philippines, in his voyage going to the Philippines, he got sick and he died in there. But in that sense, he, even if though it happened to him in a tragic way, the Chinese emperor actually honored Sultan Paduka, and he was buried in China, in Dezhou, Shandong province, where he was given imperial funeral and buried with full honors. Why I am highlighting this? Precisely because this is one way of looking at the ancient Philippines, especially the Sultanate of Sulu, where you can see that the Philippines already have this kind of strong connection with the Chinese, because now if you look at the Philippines, there's always this tension between the two countries. But if you look at history, actually, the life of Sultan Paduka Pahala symbolizes a lost sovereignty in time, when Filipino leaders exercise agency, maritime confidence, and diplomatic finesse. The story, or the life of Sultan Paduka Pahala, is anchored on what you call profound truth, that the Philippines once had the diplomatic will and the cultural sophistication to conduct international relations without colonial intermediaries. That memory is crucial, not just for national pride, but as a guiding principle of supposedly of today's foreign policy. So this is one important part of our ancient history as a country. However, there are a lot of what you call missions and voyages of early Filipinos, early leaders, early sultan, to different parts of Southeast Asia, even to China, and with all of these exchanges. So if you look at the Philippines at that time, it was not necessarily a culturally backward nor a geopolitically invisible archipelago. Early Filipinos were active players in an interconnected Asia long before Western colonialism. So if you look at it, long before Europeans, especially the Spaniards, came to Southeast Asia and colonized nations like my country, the ancestors or the early Filipinos sailed across interconnected maritime world. There were trading, there were migration, there were intermarriage, and there was a solid interaction with the peoples of Southeast Asia, China, the Pacific Islands, and even India. These waters were not defined as rigid borders, but cultural bridges, fluid and shared and alive, and there was a peaceful coexistence between different peoples of Asia. So however, this is a challenge at the moment if you look at the Philippines, because of what you call this conflict in the South China Sea. So that was the ancient Philippines. However, part of our history is where part of our history was the start of Western colonization of the Philippines. As I have said earlier, the first colonizer of the Philippines were the Spaniards, and the Spanish colonization started from 1521 to 1898. And how I would characterize the Spanish colonization, first and foremost, I think it's all about fragmentation, it's all about subjugation, and it's all about Hispanization, including the Christianization of the Philippines, of the whole archipelago. So the actual colonization of Spain started in Cebu in 1565. And this colonization basically disrupted the indigenous maritime harmony, because the Spaniards introduced rigid concept of territorial sovereignty and Western style of nation states. Spanish colonization actually disrupted what you call the existing maritime trade networks during the ancient time, and impose what you call centralized land-based system of governance. The focus shifted from decentralized maritime oriented society to a more hierarchical structure centered in Manila, which resulted in suppression of indigenous cultures and practices and the reorientation of Philippine relationship with its neighbors. I'm referring to Southeast Asian neighbors and even China for that matter, um, often through the lens of colonial power dynamics. So the Spanish colonization imposed borders, centralized power under Manila, and replaced the traditional laws with Spanish codified legal structures. And the fluid multi-ethnic maritime culture give way to hierarchical, land-centric colony governed by imperial dictates, not necessarily even within during that time inside the Philippines, but it was from Spain, and this kind of imperial dictates during the time. So what happened to the concept of the sea or of the maritime history of the Philippines, of the early Filipinos, which they viewed the sea as a space of connection. During the Spanish colonization, it becomes militarized, and it becomes it created fences. So it's not anymore fluid. It's not anymore a sea of connections or coexistence. So there were fences. It's because of the a new kind of political system or some kind of governance imposed by the Spaniards during the colonization or during the time. And also, the thing about the Spaniards is they imposed forced resettlement. They displaced coastal barangays, or what you call the basic unit of the Philippines during that time, and replaced them by by political structure that is actually controlled in most cases at the time by the churches, because the Spaniards actually introduced Christianity. That's why if you look at the Philippines at the moment, it's basically 90 to 95% Roman Catholics. It's a colonial legacy from the of the Spaniards during their time, during the colonization time. So now if you look at the Philippines, it's the only so-called Asian country in Asia, and that is a product of the Spanish colonization. And also one important footnote in the Spanish colonization, and which you can understand why today, when you talk about Philippine-China relation, it's always challenging, and it's always have this kind of misplaced animosity. It's not because Filipinos because it's not because it just happened out of the blue. It can be rooted to the time of the Spaniards in the Philippines, because during the time, the Spaniards viewed the Chinese traders as threats. So periodically, they would expel or they would massacre the Chinese traders at that time. And this is documented in history. Even some of the history books in my country, it's there, it documented, especially the Filipino-Chinese. So this paranoia is rooted, the paranoia, this seemingly not so, hard to bridge some kind of relation in many ways by some Filipinos. I'm not saying all, but some Filipinos and the Chinese is not necessarily because of anything. It's also rooted from the colonial experience of Filipinos, and this is a product of colonial insecurity, which weakened the indigenous autonomy and economic diversity of the Philippines during the Spanish colonization. And then also the Spaniards tried to dismantle the Muslim sultanates in the south of the Philippines, that is now what you call Mindanao, and also in many ways disrupted the centuries old maritime networks and replaced them with imperial subjugation. and the so-called regional diplomacy that actually the Sultanate of Sulu during the ancient time was really good at. As you can see in the life of Sultan Paduka Pahala, was disrupted and it was subjugated by the Spaniards. So in many ways, the Spaniards did not really bring civilization to what they called primitive people, because during during the Spanish colonization, the Filipinos were called Indios, and Indios basically means primitive people, or people who are not educated, who are not civilized. So we were called by the Spaniards that term. They called it, and they term us to be like primitive people. So they impose a Eurocentric kind of Eurocentric kind of model or order in the Philippines, and it erased the indigenous and Asian affiliation, laying a foundation of internal fragmentation and external dependency. And so that's basically, from my understanding, the Spanish colonization and the legacy that we inherited from that colonial experience. Now, after the Spanish colonization came what you call the so-called American or the U.S. Colonial rule in the Philippines, and this is now the start of what you call imperialism. So there was a Spanish-American war. What many people said, or the colonial history would tell, or the colonial writers would say that it was a liberation for the Philippines, but actually it was not. It was a pivot. The U.S. colonization of the Philippines continued the subjugation of indigenous sovereignty, or it continued the subjugation of the Philippines from the Spanish rule. The archipelago became America's first Pacific outpost, and the Manila Bay became the launching pad for projecting power in Asia by the Americans. So American rule institutionalized new system of governance and education, and cemented what you call the Philippines into a US-led geopolitical framework. So the Philippine Navy, the military doctrines were modeled after American forces, and even our own constitution, even until now, is a mirror image of American constitution. So this is everything that is happening or in the Philippines right now, even the new colonialism that we're experiencing, it is rooted in our experience with the Americans during their time of direct colonization. So in many ways, during the Cold War, Americans also were imposing. In many ways, the Americans replaced the indigenous notion of shared space, especially when you look at the sea. And during this era, the Philippines' modern notion of maritime sovereignty began to solidify, but not as a natural, or it's not anymore based on what you call indigenous maritime identity. It was already an import from the legal military architecture of Western powers. So basically, American colonization of the Philippines, which if you look at it, started from 1898 to 1946, because we were given by the Americans nominal independence in 1946 after the Second World War, was not merely a transition from one colonial master to another. It was a profound reshaping of the Filipino mind, the state and maritime worldview, with legacies that continue to define the Philippine approach to sovereignty, foreign relation, and maritime dispute, including the South China Sea that is very contentious even until now. And also, during that time, the American projected itself that they were our liberators because of the Battle of Manila, and they said that, we liberate you from the Spaniards. But actually, it became clear for many Filipinos and our heroes at that time, Filipino heroes at that time, that it was just a replacement of another colonial rule. And also, we found out, our ancestors found out that it's another. The U.S. had imperial ambition of its own, and the Treaty of Paris actually transferred control of the Philippines from the Spaniards to the Americans, and without consulting Filipinos. And so that's why there was what you call American Filipino War, or Philippine American War in 1899 to 1902. And this was really a betrayal of what you call Philippine independence of June 12, 1898. Because during the Spanish colonization, we kind of fought for our independence, and we thought that in June 12, 1898, we achieved independence. But actually, the Americans betrayed us by colonizing us after the Spaniards. So that is what happened. But for us, it was a betrayal of our independence from the Spaniards. So that's why right now, if you look at the Philippines, we don't celebrate we don't celebrate 1946 as our Philippine independence, but we celebrate June 12, 1898, because that was more really a fight against colonialism rather than the 1946, which was just a nominal, and the Americans said, okay, we will give you your independence. So that is really the context why that is until now we kind of celebrate the June 12, 1898 Philippine independence. Now, let's look at what you call American colonization. During the American time, there are what you call probably good things, but it depends really how you view these things. But they introduce a public education, a centralized bureaucracy, and what you call benevolent assimilation. But this, for me, to be frank, are policy of neo-colonial control. Also, during the time, the Filipino elites were co-opted into colonial oligarchy, disempowering grassroots nationalism. And when you talk about benevolent assimilation, actually, for me, the way I see it, this is more about soft imperialism. They have done this through education, English language instruction, establishing so-called democratic-looking institution like the Philippine Congress, and the system of governance that we have right now in the Philippines still very much evident at the present. And the U.S. some kind sought to civilize and integrate the Filipino into the orbit of American values and strategic interests. I will emphasize more on the American values, because really the Philippines at the moment, if you really look at us and how we conduct things and even how we think, it's pretty much still very Americanized. And this is a product of the direct subjugation of the Philippines during the American rule or during colonial times. This is very much evident even until now. So basically, when you talk about...
Can I just ask? It's the official independence of 1946, as you suggest, really didn't have a significant imprint on the local people, who still look to the experiences of 1898 really as the more critical moment. But from that period after the Second World War through to the early 1980s, from my memory, come the 1980s, there was a period of substantial local turmoil, with local opposition to the long-standing Marcos regime really coming to the fore. And this probably betrays how old I am, but I remember Aquino being a key figure during that period, and the Reagan administration actually backed Marcos for a long time. Now, I raise that because it seems that for a short period of time, at least, between, say, the early 1980s, early to mid 1980s, for maybe 20 years or so, there emerged the possibilities of a post-colonial Filipino identity that sought to reclaim some of its historical independence, and it manifests in a couple of ways. One was some of the American bases were shut down. So Clark Base, for instance, was shut down. But also, it seemed to me anyway, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for that period of time, there was a real attempt to connect to the region through a more local or a more historical lens. Would that be a fair characterization, number one? And the present situation, of course, seems to be a repudiation of that 25, 30-year or 40-year period of post-colonial re-emergence, where some of the more ingrained colonial habits of thinking have come back to dominate the body politic.
Yeah, let me address that in the post-colonial, post-American period. That basically is the post-colonial period of the Philippines. But just to sum it up, the American period basically, if you really look at it at the moment, and it's in terms of what is going on in the Philippines right now, and how Philippines is being viewed as well by other countries in the region, it's just, first and foremost, the Philippines become a source of raw materials and a market for American goods. It happens before, during the direct colonization of the Philippines, and it's still happening at the moment as a new colonial. And then there was military installation, as you have said, the Subic and Clark establishes big naval base of the United States, and projecting U.S. power across the Pacific, and the Philippines become part of the American strategy in the Pacific, and so basically the Philippines becomes a forward base for American expansionism in Asia, against China and Japan, and repositioning the Americans during the Cold War and the contemporary, and if you look at the contemporary Philippines, a mirror image of a continuation of this is what is you can see it from you can see it through the different military agreements between the Philippines and the United States, and one of that would be the Visiting Forces Agreement, EDCA, and the U.S. bases in the country even until now. So basically, American colonization of the Philippines is really not about liberation, as what they have always projected and they have always said in their own rhetoric, liberation against the Spaniards. But it's a continuation of imperial domination, strategically shifting the Philippines from this periphery of Spanish Empire to the front line of the U.S. Pacific hegemony. So now, as you have said earlier, how the Philippines is contemplating or imagining itself in the post-colonial period. I'm referring to the post-American period. As I have said earlier, the Philippines was given nominal independence in 1946. But actually, most Filipino, those who really understand what happened, and understand that we were bought from actually the Philippines were sold to the Americans by the Spaniards through the Treaty of Paris. So people who understand this, the Filipinos who understand this, note in history, don't really accept that our independence is 1946. That's why there was a change, and that was June 12, 18. Now we're celebrating June 12, 1898. And in the post-colonial period, still the American influence is very strong even until now, because you have different military agreements like the Military Bases Agreement of 1947, and you have the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. And until now, these are very evident of the Philippines. So the question is how the Filipinos are, what is the colonial legacy, and especially of the American legacy, direct American legacy, colonial legacy. First and foremost, the Philippines was, if you look at and if you compare the Philippines before the colonial period and now, there you can see that the Philippines before was fluid, connected, and independent maritime civilization, engaging with different peoples in Asia Pacific and Southeast Asia. But when the colonization time came by Spain and the United States, we kind of succumb to the so-called Westphalian concept of sovereignty with artificial borders and militarize even the seas. So the question is that I'm actually posing also to Filipinos is, can we rediscover our pre-colonial maritime diplomacy and strategic autonomy, or the Philippines would remain in the new colonial realm of the United States? And and if we gonna be able to recover or revisit our maritime consciousness, which were forgotten already, predating this colonial experience, and maybe we can possibly imagine what kind of identity we have in the post-colonial um, period, and how we gonna conceptualize what you call sovereignty, because the Philippines emerged in the 20th century as a nation state hunted by two things: by central trauma, the trauma of sovereignty lost and sovereignty reclaimed. And it becomes like an obsession for us, that we have to preserve our sovereignty because we have our experience we have our colonial experience. However, if you really look at the Filipinos at the moment in terms of identity, and how they will reconcile what you call the pre-colonial Filipinos world views, and how they see themselves, and how Filipinos now see themselves, it's kind of a debate. Because if you really look at the pre-colonial Filipinos, when you look at the sea and how it conceptualized even political governance, it was more about existing peacefully with the rest of the region. However, and that is the early Filipinos way of thinking. Now, if you look at the product of how we are thinking right now, as who went through the process of colonization or the experience of colonization, we kind of have this assertion and concept of rigidity, rigid territoriality, adherence to Westphalian model of sovereignty. And so we are kind of caught in between concept of colonial borders and indigenous fluidity, or what you call indigenous experience of the ancient times. So we are caught in between that. So the Filipinos are, I don't know for other Filipinos, but I think we're suffering from what you call crisis of identity, in that sense, and in a way. So
It
that is a challenge
seems
for us.
like it seems like the post-colonial experience, as you described, has been actually incredibly traumatic,
Mm,
because the sovereignty that has been achieved at a formal level has perhaps not yet unfolded in a way in which the nation as a whole has regained its sense of sovereign identity.
mm.
So we have legal sovereignty, but we don't have sovereignty of identity. And would it be too bold to suggest that, in fact, part of the domestic turmoil and contest that takes place today, and perhaps even reflects back over the last 40 years, is a challenge and a question about Filipino identity in a post colonial era?
Yes, I think so. Because, if you look at the Philippines right now, in terms of its identity, both as a people and even as a nation state, um, there is what you call this profound post-colonial insecurity. A sense that Filipino sovereignty requires. It seems like the way we conceptualize sovereignty, it's quite so insecure to the point that it requires a validation or defense from a more powerful patron like the United States. So this is this is a reflex in a way that is not purely strategic. It's cultural and psychological, shaped by decades of American colonialism and dependency. So that is also a crisis of identity, to be frank. Um, the U.S. military alliances example, the U.S. military alliance is a legacy of colonial dependency. So reflect what you call the our thinking as Filipinos is not yet completely decolonized, especially, and it reflects in the way we think about foreign policy and how we assert our sovereignty, which is in many ways, to be frank, is being outsourced in function. In rhetorics, we're saying that we're sovereign, but in function, it's being outsourced by running to former colonial patron, the United States. So in that sense, there's still even a crisis when you talk about how Filipinos think through the concept of sovereignty. It's still an identity crisis, or a crisis for that matter. So this is a very evident, and even the way we see ourselves. Filipinos usually see themselves as peace-loving, law-abiding, and sovereignty-defending people. Yet in practice, the Filipino state engages in joint military exercises that actually escalate tension, strategic alignments, that reproduces what you call Cold War mentality. And, this kind of framework inherited in the Western international law, especially when you talk about the South China Sea dispute. So basically, there is some kind of disconnect between the identity that we're trying to say who we are and what we are, and all of these things. But on the other hand, the behavior is quite different. And also, there's also a little of crisis in terms of Filipinos who say themselves that they're peace loving, yet our leaders are doing the otherwise. So this is some kind of contradiction, and this is some kind of post-colonial subjectivity that actually, if you really look at the Philippines at the moment, it is very evident and clear. So in many ways, the Philippines is a post-colonial nation that is struggling to rediscover its identity, its values, and its place in the Asia-Pacific region. So this is something that the Filipinos has to confront, I think, and to settle. And this is not saying that we abandon the concept of sovereignty, but it's more about trying to look at the history, the cultural wisdom, and the vision that the Philippines belong to Asia, and it's an Asian country, and it should not be dependent and to an external power, especially it's a colonial master. So these are the kind of struggles that we have as a nation, as a people, especially when you talk about Filipino identity with reference to the concept of sovereignty and even strategic autonomy as a country. So this is really the reality right now. But of course, Professor Warwick, not everyone in the Philippines think like this. Of course, many Filipinos are they in many ways they don't have the time to think about this kind of discussion. But actually, these are very important, supposedly discussion that, especially the intellectuals and even the young people should know and should reflect on, because this will define how my country will proceed, given the so many challenges that it faces at the moment.
Yeah, it's a fascinating historical and contemporary case study, if you will, of how centuries of colonialization actually leaves deep scars, not just in economic terms through expropriation and dependency, but actually the much longer lasting effects of cultural and intellectual domination. So much so that long standing traditional habits of conduct and behavior, and dare I say, identity, have been suppressed
Mm,
and replaced by other perspectives. Look, we could talk about this obviously for a long time, and this
mm,
question of Filipino identity seems to be actually central to the question of Filipino sovereignty in the 21st century. perhaps we can find another occasion in the not too distant future to dive a little bit deeper into some of the more contemporary, tangible aspects of that. But we might call it a day here, Anna, because I think we've covered a lot of territory. There's a lot for people to think about and to reflect upon. And once again, I can only thank you for coming on and sharing with us this insight into Filipino history and the aspirations and challenges that the Filipino people today confront and seek to overcome in their pursuit of sovereignty and prosperity and peace in the region. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Professor Warwick, and I really hope that that I have shared something substantial. This is not an easy because I'm not a historian, but that is how I viewed our history from the pre-colonial time to the present, and it's still challenging, really, when you talk about reconciling, the experience and how the early Filipinos lived and in ancient times and now, which is basically a very conflicting situation in the Philippines. And thank you so much
Absolutely.
for the opportunity.
Absolute pleasure. Look, we speak from both the head and the heart. So I appreciate the fact that you did both with us on this conversation.
Thank you so much.
If you liked that video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. If you'd like to see more from TIO, check out the Substack link. Or if you'd like to see more from me, check out my Substack in the description.